Hello and welcome to How Do I BI. This is a mini-part screencast series that's a companion to my book, Smart Business Intelligence Solutions with Microsoft SQL Server 2008. I'm Lynn Langett, a developer evangelist with Microsoft in Southern California. On today's installment, we're going to take a look at the sample AdventureWorks OLAP Cube as it appears for developers in the Business Intelligence Development Studio environment. Before we do that, we're going to talk about FAQs and gotchas around examining the sample cube so that you can understand what end users will see when they look at the cube that you've created. Under FAQs, you might be reminded that SQL Server Analysis Services does not install any of the samples by default. I recorded a previous screencast with the name of installing and configuring samples to help you do that. The samples are edition, machine, and version specific, and they're found on CodePlex. The BIDS Cube browser is really only for developers or administrators. It is not designed as an end user display interface for OLAP cubes. That being said, it does use pivot table technology that can be found in other products which are designed for end users, such as Excel 2007 and more. There are some gotchas when you're taking a look at the cube in BIDS. First of all, you have to make sure that you can connect successfully to the underlying data source, which will be a set of relational tables. In our case, it will be AdventureWorks DW 2008. If you receive an error when you attempt to browse the cube in the cube browser in BIDS, do verify your connection string under data sources in BIDS. You also want to make sure that you have successfully built, processed, and deployed the samples, which include the metadata or the XMLA that define the cube structure so that you can properly see it. Before we jump over and take a look at our cube in BIDS, I want to highlight yet another community expert for the BI community. His name is John Welch, and he's one of the co-authors of the book referenced in the beginning of this screencast. He is a SQL Server and SQL Server Integration Services in particular MVP, and you can see his blog address on this slide. So now we'll go ahead and go over to the screencast. To examine the sample OLAP cube, you'll best open Business Intelligence Development Studio as shown here on the screen. And if you have a cube which you have already processed and deployed as we've recommended, then you will want to click on File, Open, Analysis Services Database, and a dialog box will open which allow you to select the server. In our case, it's going to be localhost, so we're just going to put in a dot. And then the database. The sample is called AdventureWorks DW, and this is the analysis services database, not the relational source, which is called AdventureWorks DW 2008. Then you click OK. What this is doing is loading the XMLA metadata up into the browser, which defines the structure of the cube, connecting to the underlying relational database, which loads the cube with data, primarily fact and dimension information, and then displays this information inside of BIDS in the Solution Explorer and through various viewers. So this is just going to take a minute to load, and once this comes up, then we're going to open up the cube browser, and you can see it coming up here, and we'll navigate to the browser page so that you can understand what the end users will see when they're looking at an OLAP cube. I find if you're new to BI development, the more time that you can spend examining the cube and understanding what it is that you're trying to build for end users, the better success you can have in creating, implementing, and deploying a cube that will be used by a large number of people in your organization. So you can see over in Solution Explorer, we've got the sample AdventureWorks DW loaded here, and we're going to navigate to the cubes folder. And inside of the cubes folder, we have two sample cubes. The one we're interested in is called AdventureWorks. So we're going to double click it to load its information in the various editors and viewers that are available with BIDS. We're going to close the toolbox because it just takes up screen real estate that we would prefer to have for our cube browser, and we're going to see that we have a multi-tabbed environment to work with our cube. As I've mentioned, when you take actions in any of these tabs, what you're doing is you're actually creating XMLA metadata, which is saved by using visual designers. We're going to go right to the last designer, which is called the browser. And in a second here, the browser will load up the information from our large enterprise cube sample. And you can see inside of the browser we have a submenu, and this is characteristic of all of the tabs inside of the work areas in BIDS. And we have a metadata browser on the left side. We start by seeing the ability to filter by measure group. And what this means is if we wish to have a simpler view of the cube so that we can verify that we've built in a way that's useful and correct for our particular business needs, rather than loading all of the measure information, which is the usually numeric and additive or fact information, we can filter by a subset of measures. Measures are grouped based on source fact tables. So in our case, we just want to look at measures that relate to internet sales. Now, once we do this, in addition to removing the other measures, also dimensions that do not have associations with the measure that's selected will be removed. You can see right now we have all the dimensions from the cube, but if we click on internet sales, we have a smaller set of dimensions. You can almost think of this as somewhat comparable to a relational view or a set of relational views over relational tables. It just is implemented against a multi-dimensional structure. So if we open internet sales, we can see that we have two types of measures associated with this cube. The four plain bars are a typical measure, which is one that is actually stored from the fact table. If there is a small calculator icon, then this is what's called a calculated measure, and this is actually created on the fly when queried. Very analogous to a calculated cell in Excel, with the difference being that this structure is calculated across various dimensions, so it's a multidimensional space. So let's start by taking internet sales amount, clicking on it from the measure group metadata browser, and then dragging it over to the totals section of the cube browser, and that gives us the total sales for all time. Then we'll also drag another measure, it's a calculated measure, gross profit margin, on to show that we can display multiple measures. So we've been a pretty successful company. We've had 41% gross profit over all time. In order to give more meaning to these measures, we're going to add some dimensions, and dimensions can be added on rows or on columns. Also, we can have the ability to filter by dimensions and slice by dimensions. That's the top part of the browser. So we can open up a dimension, for example, product, in the metadata browser, and we can have the ability to drag individual attributes such as the product name, the style, so on and so forth, over and see the financial results for a particular product. However, if you have a large number of products, that might not be really meaningful. So what we've done is we've grouped the products into hierarchies, which represent the way the business looks at those products and manages them. So we're going to take this hierarchy, which is represented by a tower of multiple dots rather than a rectangle of dots, called product categories, and drag it over to the row section. And when we do that, we can see that now our measure subtotals for the particular categories, accessories, bikes, clothing, as well as a grand total. In addition, if we want to, and I'm just going to size this a little bit so you can see it better, we can drill down to see the subcategory results and then to see the individual product results, and then we can drill up. Drilling down and drilling up is accomplished by clicking on the plus button to the left of the category name. Now, if we weren't interested in looking at subcategories, which is called a level in the world of OLAP, we could actually just remove that, and then we would see only categories and products. Another thing that we can do, and we can remove products if we want to as well to simplify the display, is we can pivot or rotate the information. So you can think of this cube almost like a very, very complex and large Rubik's Cube, if you will, that can be turned or rotated. So to do that, we can take the category information from the products hierarchy, and we can click on it and drag it and drop it into the column fields area. And you can see now the information is displayed across the top rather than to the side. So I'm going to bring that back down, and then I'm going to select another aspect to look at our information. I'll select ship date, and I'm going to drag ship date week of year up to the slicer area in the top where it says dimension. And you'll note that under dimension now we have ship date. The hierarchy is listed, ship date, week of year. And then we have an operator, and we can say equal. In our case, we're going to say not equal to. And then in the filter expression, we're going to click the drop down, and this displays a list of all the values in this particular hierarchy. And in this case, our labels are not super intuitive, they're simply 1, 2, 3. So I'm just going to click on a few of the labels to define a subset for our slicer. So what this is showing us is the sales amount and the gross profit margin for the particular weeks of year that we've selected. Now what's happening when we're dragging and dropping information onto this viewer is dynamically queries are being implemented against the cube. Now these queries are being implemented in the language that the cube understands, which is called MDX or multidimensional expressions. It is possible for you to see the MDX being generated, not directly in bids. You'd have to use a capture tool like Profiler. So do spend some time examining the sample cube. It's going to help you to understand what end users are going to see, and it's also going to help you to understand what it is you're building. Thank you.